Emma Lewis never imagined her life could fall apart so quietly. One minute she was in love, and the next, she was staring at an empty apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes and memories she wished she could erase. The breakup with Ryan wasn't loud or dramatic, it was slow and painful, like watching the color drain out of a beautiful painting. 3 years together had turned into nothing more than a final text that said, "Maybe we're just not right for each other anymore." It had been 2 months, yet Emma still couldn't stop checking her phone. She would wake up hoping for a message from him, only to feel that same emptiness every time she saw nothing. Her job at a small marketing firm in Seattle had become her only escape. She'd stay late, pretending to be busy just so she wouldn't have to go home to silence. The nights were the hardest. The apartment still smelled faintly of Ryan's cologne, and sometimes she'd catch herself setting an extra plate at the table out of habit. Her younger brother, Ethan, noticed everything. He lived in Portland and worked as a graphic designer, but he called her every evening. At first, Emma brushed him off with short answers. "I'm fine," she'd say, even though her voice cracked every time. But Ethan didn't believe her. He'd grown up watching his sister take care of everyone. And now, it was his turn to return the favor. One Friday night, after another lonely week, Emma heard a knock on the door. When she opened it, she saw Ethan standing there, holding a bag of takeout and wearing that same easy smile she'd missed. "Thought you might be hungry," he said, stepping inside before she could protest. Emma blinked in surprise. "You drove 3 hours just to bring me food." "Not food," he said, setting the bag on the counter. "Company." She tried to act annoyed but ended up laughing instead. It was the first real laugh she'd had in weeks. Ethan unpacked the food, Chinese takeout, her favorite, and soon they were sitting on the couch, eating noodles and watching old movies they used to love as kids. Between bites, Ethan asked, "You ever think about doing something new? A trip maybe? A new hobby?" Emma shrugged. "I can barely get through a day without crying. I don't think a trip would fix that." He looked at her gently. "Maybe not. But being stuck here isn't fixing it either." His words stung because they were true. She had been living in the same loop, working, sleeping, and pretending everything was fine. But for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel completely numbed. Later that night, the two of them sat quietly, the movie still playing in the background. Emma leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder, not even thinking about it. It felt natural, comforting. Ethan didn't move or speak. He just let her rest there, his calm presence saying everything words couldn't. For the first time since Ryan left, Emma felt like she could breathe. The next morning, she woke to find Ethan cooking breakfast. The smell of pancakes filled the air, and she felt something she hadn't felt in months. "You didn't have to do all this," she said, rubbing her eyes. "I know," he said simply, "but I wanted to." They sat down to eat, and Ethan told her stories from his work, about his new clients and funny mistakes he'd made. Emma found herself smiling more than she thought she could. When he had to leave later that day, the apartment felt empty again, but not in the same way. Something had changed. After that, Ethan started visiting more often. Sometimes he'd show up unannounced. Other times he'd call just to make sure she'd eaten dinner. Slowly, Emma began to feel herself coming back to life. She started going for walks again, cleaning her apartment, and even painting something she hadn't done since college. But the memories of Ryan still lingered. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart skipped, hoping it was him. It never was. She didn't tell Ethan that part. She didn't want to seem weak. One evening, as she looked through old photos, she saw a picture of herself and Ryan laughing at a summer fair. Her throat tightened. She missed him, but she also missed herself, the version of her who believed love could last forever. Tears filled her eyes, and for a moment she let them fall freely. It wasn't sadness this time, it was release. Just then, her phone rang. It was Ethan. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. "I'm getting there," she said softly. "That's all that matters," he replied. Emma smiled through her tears. Maybe she didn't need to rush healing. Maybe she just needed to stop running from it. That night, she sat on her balcony, watching the city lights shimmer below. For the first time, the silence didn't scare her. Somewhere deep down, she realized Ethan had done something Ryan never could. He showed up when she needed someone most, without expecting anything in return. And as she wrapped herself in a blanket, sipping her tea, she felt a small spark of hope return. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the beginning of something even stronger: peace. The pain hadn't vanished, but it was changing shape, turning into something softer. Emma didn't know what the next days would bring, but one thing was clear: she wasn't broken anymore. She was just learning how to heal, one quiet night at a time. That was the night Emma realized maybe she didn't need Ryan to feel whole again. Maybe all she needed was a reminder that she was still loved. And somehow, Ethan had become that reminder. And deep inside, for the first time in months, she whispered to herself, "I'm going to be okay." Days turned into weeks, and Emma slowly began to find rhythm in her life again. After his first surprise visit, Ethan started coming over every weekend, bringing a sense of calm that her apartment had been missing. He told her he could work remotely for a while, so he decided to stay in Seattle for a few weeks. At first, Emma protested, saying she didn't want to be a burden, but Ethan just smiled and said, "You've taken care of me my whole life. Let me do something for you now." Ethan's presence changed the atmosphere completely. He filled the quiet spaces with music, laughter, and the smell of home-cooked meals. Every morning, he made coffee for both of them and insisted they go for a walk around the neighborhood. At first, Emma resisted, but soon the walks became her favorite part of the day. They would stroll by the lake, talking about everything and nothing: how life used to be simpler, how people changed, and how hard it was to trust again after being hurt. One morning, as the fog lifted over the water, Ethan looked at her and said, "You know, sometimes we think losing someone means losing ourselves, but it's really just a chance to start again." His words stuck with her all day. She realized how much he had grown up since the last time she saw him as her little brother. He wasn't the shy kid who followed her around anymore. He was thoughtful, confident, and had a quiet strength that made her feel safe. They began to cook together in the evenings. Ethan would experiment with recipes, and Emma would laugh at his messy attempts to flip pancakes or season things properly. Slowly, she started feeling joy again, the kind that wasn't forced. They played music while cooking, danced around the kitchen, and turned ordinary moments into small pockets of happiness. One Friday, Ethan suggested they go on a drive to the coast. Emma hesitated but agreed. The long road stretched ahead of them, lined with tall trees that glowed gold in the sunlight. They sang along to old songs from their childhood, laughing at how off-key they were. For the first time in months, Emma forgot about Ryan completely. When they reached the ocean, Ethan parked the car near a cliffside. The waves crashed below, and the wind was cool against their faces. Emma stood by the railing, letting the salty air wash over her. "It's strange," she said softly. "I thought I'd never feel peace again, but right now I just do." Ethan looked at her with a smile that carried quiet pride. "That's because you're remembering who you are." They watched the sunset in silence. The sky turned shades of pink and gold, and for a moment, everything felt still. Emma didn't realize it, but Ethan was looking at her not with pity, but with admiration. He had always cared for her deeply, but now, he was seeing her in a new light. She was strong, kind, and slowly rebuilding herself. On the drive home, Emma leaned her head against the window, feeling lighter than she had in months. The sound of the ocean still echoed in her mind. For the first time, she wasn't replaying memories of Ryan. She was thinking about how good it felt to simply live again. That night, when they got back, they made tea and sat by the window watching the rain fall. The city lights reflected off the wet streets, and everything felt soft and quiet. "Do you ever miss someone who doesn't deserve it?" Emma asked suddenly. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, but one day you realize missing them doesn't mean you want them back. It just means you're human." His calm honesty touched her. She looked at him and smiled faintly. "You always know what to say." "Maybe," he said, "or maybe I just listen." That night, when Emma went to bed, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about how different things felt with Ethan around. He wasn't trying to fix her. He was just there, steady, patient, and kind. He gave her space to breathe again. The next morning, she woke up early and found Ethan sitting on the balcony, sketching something in his notebook. He had always been good at drawing, but she hadn't seen him do it in years. "What are you working on?" she asked. He turned the page toward her. It was a sketch of the ocean view they'd seen the day before, and in it, there was a small figure standing near the railing her. "You look peaceful there," he said softly. Emma's chest tightened, not with sadness, but with something warmer. "That's beautiful," she whispered. After that day, something began to shift between them, something unspoken. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was full of understanding. Ethan had become her comfort, her reminder that life could be gentle again. Days went by quickly. They redecorated the apartment, adding bright plants, candles, and paintings. Emma even laughed when Ethan accidentally spilled paint on the carpet. The laughter felt new, like it belonged to a version of her that had been buried under heartbreak. One evening, they were sitting on the couch watching an old comedy show when Emma suddenly said, "You know, I think I'm finally ready to stop looking back." Ethan turned to her, his eyes soft. "Good," he said, "because life's waiting for you to look forward." She smiled, feeling a quiet strength rise inside her. The pain was still there, but it didn't control her anymore. Ethan had helped her find herself again, not through big gestures, but through small, steady kindness. That night, as she lay in bed, she realized something important. He hadn't distracted her from her pain. He had helped her face it. And that made all the difference. Emma closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "I'm healing." And for the first time, she truly believed it. Autumn had just begun to settle in when Emma realized that her apartment no longer felt cold. Ethan's laughter, the smell of morning coffee, and the sound of quiet music had brought life back into every corner. Weeks had passed since the coastal trip, and though things between them were easy and natural, there was something new growing quietly, something neither of them dared to name. One evening, the rain poured harder than usual. The city lights shimmered through the mist, and thunder rolled across the sky. Emma and Ethan had planned to go out for dinner, but the storm made them stay in. Ethan lit a few candles when the power flickered, and soon, the apartment was glowing softly in their warm light. He found an old playlist on her laptop, filled with soft jazz and slow piano songs she used to love. They sat together on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, talking about their childhood. It started with small memories, bike rides, school events, their parents' old traditions, but as the night grew deeper, the conversation became more personal. "You were always the brave one," Ethan said with a smile. "Even when you were scared, you'd never show it." Emma shook her head. "I wasn't brave. I just didn't want anyone to see me fall apart." Ethan looked at her for a moment before saying, "You don't have to hide that anymore." "Not with me." Something in the way he said it made her heart beat faster. She didn't know why. it wasn't romantic in the way movies showed love. It was deeper, calmer. It was the feeling of being truly seen for the first time in a long time. The thunder rumbled again, and Emma flinched slightly. Without thinking, Ethan reached out and held her hand. His palm was warm, steady, grounding. He didn't say anything, and he didn't need to. The silence between them felt safe. "You're different now," Emma said softly, watching the candlelight flicker across his face. "Different how?" "Stronger. More sure of yourself." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I had to grow up. Watching you get hurt taught me a lot about what love should and shouldn't be." His words lingered in the air like something fragile. Emma's eyes softened. She remembered how broken she had been after Ryan, how she had stopped believing that anyone could truly care without wanting something in return. Yet Ethan had proved her wrong every single day. They sat quietly for a while, listening to the rain. Then Ethan got up to refill their tea. When he came back, he found Emma sitting near the window, watching the droplets run down the glass. "I used to hate the rain," she said. "Now it feels peaceful." He handed her the mug and said, "That's because it doesn't remind you of him anymore." Emma looked up at him, surprised by how right he was. The ache she used to feel every time it rained was gone. Instead, she felt calm, safe. When she turned her eyes back to him, something inside her shifted. She saw not just her brother, but the person who had stood beside her when she was at her lowest, who had believed in her, when she didn't believe in herself. It was a strange feeling, one she couldn't explain or name, but it filled her with warmth. They watched a movie after that, though neither really paid attention. The soft hum of rain mixed with the low sound of dialogue on the screen. Emma leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder again, just as she had that first night. This time, it wasn't out of sadness, it was comfort. Familiarity. Ethan didn't move. He just sat there, his eyes on the screen, his thoughts far away. He felt it too, that strange closeness that didn't belong to siblings or friends. It wasn't about romance or attraction. It was something deeper. It was trust, healing, and unspoken care. When the movie ended, the room stayed silent. Emma didn't lift her head. She just whispered, "You've changed my life, Ethan. You really have." He looked down at her, his voice soft. "No, you did that yourself. I just reminded you how strong you were." Another clap of thunder echoed outside, and Emma tightened her hold on the blanket. Ethan reached out, gently covering her hand with his. "You're safe," he said quietly. "You've always been safe with me." His words melted into her heart. She didn't know why they affected her so deeply, but they did. There was something healing in them, something that made her believe she truly could move forward. A moment later, Ethan stood up, looking slightly uncertain. "I think I'll head to bed," he said with a faint smile. "You should get some sleep too." Emma nodded but watched him as he walked down the hall. The soft light from the candles flickered against his back, and for a brief second, she felt something inside her twist, something gentle but powerful. When she finally lay down, she couldn't stop thinking about the way he had looked at her, the way he had held her hand when she was scared. It wasn't romantic, not in the traditional sense. It was something purer, a kind of love built on care, understanding, and quiet presence. The storm lasted all night, but Emma didn't feel lonely. She drifted to sleep thinking about how far she'd come from the broken woman Ryan had left behind. Ethan had helped her find peace, not by fixing her heart, but by showing her it could heal on its own. And yet, as she fell asleep, she couldn't ignore one thought that echoed softly in her mind. "Something has changed between us. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was something just as powerful, a connection that made her believe in love again. Not the kind that leaves scars, but the kind that heals them. Outside, the rain slowed, and morning crept into the city. A new day was coming, and for the first time in a long while, Emma wasn't afraid to face it. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the curtains, filling the apartment with a soft golden glow. The storm had passed, leaving behind a quiet stillness that felt almost peaceful. Emma woke up earlier than usual, her mind still replaying the night before, the laughter, the thunder, and Ethan's words that had stayed with her. "You've always been safe with me." She walked into the kitchen and found Ethan already there, making pancakes. He looked up and smiled, that familiar warmth in his eyes. "Morning," he said, handing her a cup of coffee. She sat across from him, watching as he flipped the pancakes with ease. It amazed her how natural it felt having him there, as if he had always belonged in her world this way. "You didn't sleep much, did you?" Ethan asked, noticing the faint tiredness in her eyes. Emma shook her head lightly. "Just thinking," she admitted. "About Ryan?" "No," she said quickly, surprising even herself. "About life. About how different everything feels now." Ethan smiled softly. "Different can be good." They ate breakfast in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was calm, gentle. Emma realized that peace didn't have to be loud. It could be as quiet as morning coffee shared with someone who truly cared. After breakfast, Ethan mentioned he'd be heading back to Portland soon. His remote work was ending, and he needed to return to his office. Emma froze for a moment, not sure how to react. The thought of him leaving made the apartment feel suddenly emptier. "Oh," she said quietly. "That's soon." He nodded. "Yeah, but I'll visit. You know that." She smiled faintly, trying to hide the heaviness in her chest. "Of course." Over the next few days, they spent every moment together. They walked through the park, cooked dinner, and even painted one of her walls a new color. Every laugh, every shared glance felt meaningful. Yet, underneath it all, Emma knew that something was ending. Not in a sad way, but in a natural one. Ethan had come into her life when she needed someone the most, and now she was strong enough to stand again. On Ethan's last night in Seattle, the sky turned soft with the colors of dusk. They sat on the balcony, watching the sunset. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain. "It's hard to believe how much has changed," Emma said quietly. "When you first showed up, I couldn't even get through a day without feeling broken." Ethan leaned back, his eyes still on the horizon. "You just needed a reminder of who you were. You've always been strong, Emma. You just forgot for a while." His words filled her with warmth and a touch of sadness. She turned to him and whispered, "You helped me remember." He smiled, but there was a hint of emotion in his voice. "That's what family's for, right?" Emma nodded, though a small part of her didn't want to let go of what they had shared. It wasn't something ordinary. It was deeper than friendship, quieter than love, yet full of meaning. As the evening grew darker, they talked about the future. Ethan told her about new projects waiting for him in Portland, and Emma shared her plans to start painting again, maybe even hold a small art exhibit someday. The idea made her excited for the first time in years. When it was time for him to pack, Emma helped him fold his things neatly into a small suitcase,